you ready to prime your focus, to move past scattered days and channel your energy into what really matters? This is Primed for ADHD, the podcast for high-functioning women who want simple, brain-friendly ways to feel more in control. I'm your host, Andrea Toole, ADHD coach and educator. Welcome back to the Primed for ADHD focus. I'm Andrea Toole, ADHD educator and coach for women in midlife. How'd you like that music? I've been using that same intro and outro music since the first iteration of my podcast, and it just always makes me feel good. It's called Pleasant Porridge by a composer named Kevin MacLeod, and I found it on one of the royalty-free music sites when I launched this podcast in, 2018 or thereabouts, 2020? I can't remember exactly when it was. So today we are talking about something I see over and over again in my work with women in midlife and when talking to female friends and colleagues, and I see it in myself. That is, you saw it in the podcast title, what happens when ADHD meets perimenopause and why so many women say it feels like they're losing their minds. You know, that cliche joke, is it ADHD, perimenopause, or am I losing my mind? Now, if you're not a woman in midlife, don't skip this episode. I mean, you can, but there's no need to. Listen anyway. You might benefit from knowing more about the experience. And you have women in your life, so please share this with them on your social media networks, text it, whatever, send it around. And yeah, this way, women in your life, when they're going through things, you can say, hey, I heard this interesting podcast, and a quote from it. That would be fun. I mean, that would be great for me. It would make me feel good. So today I want to take you on a short journey. Where you've been, where you are now, and where you're going next, even if that next part doesn't feel clear yet. If you've noticed more brain fog, more emotional sensitivity, less patience, or that the strategies you relied on for years just don't seem to work anymore, this is the episode for you. And I want to say this clearly from the start. This isn't you failing, you're not regressing, you're not imagining it, you're not losing your mind, even if it feels like it. Something fundamental is changing. Once you understand what it is, the whole experience becomes less intimidating and disorienting. Now, before I explain anything, I want to slow this down and turn it over to you with a few questions. You, the women listening. After each one, I'll pause for a few seconds and let you process the question and notice what comes up. And this is actually a good opportunity to journal if that's your practice, if you have the tools available right now. So, question 1. When did you first notice that the symptoms or strategies you relied on to feel like a functional adult weren't working the same way anymore? Question 2, and you can pause these and ponder too. Question 2, what were you still trying to do anyway, even though it felt harder than it used to? And question 3, what did you assume that change said about you? For many people, many women, the answer to that last question sounds like self-doubt, what that change said about you. It sounds like wondering whether you're slipping, losing capacity, or somehow becoming less capable than you used to be. Many women reach midlife without ever having ADHD recognized or supported, or even diagnosed, but that's a whole other thing. In the meantime, they built workarounds. They became highly competent compensators. They over-prepare. They rely on urgency. They use stress and adrenaline as fuel to get things done. They people please, perfect, and push through. They appear highly responsible, reliable, and capable. They appear successful. And I do see this in men too. But men have their own hormonal challenges. I'm going to have to research that at some point. But with the women here, they appear successful. They have the careers, the families, responsibility, reliability. Again, men too. Again, a whole other thing. And for years, all of this has worked. The body and brain can carry the load for a long time. All those techniques they use, they can use them for a long time, but it's not sustainable. Over time, competence becomes intertwined with overexertion. Success is built on constant self-management, constant vigilance, and constant pushing through. Internally, it takes effort, a lot of it. And then, midlife arrives. The coping strategies no longer work like they used to, or they don't work at all. It's a new stage that can be destabilizing. So at this point, I'm going to discuss hormones. If you have ADHD and you're in midlife, hormonal changes are part of the picture. For neurotypical women, the hormone-only story generally goes something like this. Brain fog, mood swings, lower tolerance for stress, difficulty focusing, all those fun things. And those symptoms are real, they're common, they show up during perimenopause. Yes, they do. And I'm sure you've seen that all over your social media feeds and when talking to friends. But for many women with ADHD who experience those already, the brain fog, the lower tolerance to stress, the difficulty focusing, etc., it's different. It feels like something that already required significant effort to manage has become unsustainable and just a different feeling. It's almost like it feels like your ADHD got worse. And midlife isn't just one change, it's several things happening at once. There is a lot going on externally, and there's a lot happening beneath the surface. Perimenopause is a transition period. For some women, it lasts a few years. For others, much longer. When ADHD and hormones affect you, you might catch yourself thinking, I used to handle this. I used to be organized. I used to have energy. I used to fall asleep easily and sleep through the night for 8 hours. Oh God, I miss that. That's me talking, yeah. And now maybe you forget appointments. You feel emotionally raw. You're more irritated than you recognize yourself being. Your tolerance for noise, clutter, or demands is much lower. You can't fall asleep without taking your melatonin or an edible or whatever it is you take. And it's especially distressing. What happens is often a combination of three things. First, the hormonal changes, which we will talk about very soon. Second, cumulative burnout from years of compensating and masking. And third, life. Everyone around you is going through their own life stages, and those affect you too. So on the hormonal part of that triad, during this time, women experience hormonal fluctuations, especially in estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Hormones don't decline in a linear pattern. They spike, they crash, they fluctuate in ways that can feel completely unpredictable. Hormones play a significant role in how the brain functions, regulates attention, energy, and emotion. Energy in particular plays a role in how dopamine functions in the brain. I'll say that again. Estrogen plays a role in how dopamine functions in the brain. Estrogen regulates dopamine production, which is crucial for ADHD, and estrogen influences brain response. So, as estrogen drops during perimenopause and menopause, women with ADHD may face greater issues with focus, motivation, memory, and mood. Hormonal changes can intensify ADHD symptoms. And then there's progesterone. Progesterone affects GABA, which is a calming neurotransmitter. GABA is an acronym, but I'm not even going to say it out. When progesterone declines, women feel more anxious, have trouble sleeping, or become irritable, worsening ADHD symptoms. And as I was researching this months ago for a blog post, the things started to make sense. And maybe they are for you too now. So this is why ADHD symptoms can feel more intense at midlife, or why different ADHD qualities that lay dormant for years suddenly emerge, even if you were coping pretty well before. It's not that ADHD itself suddenly appeared, it's that hormonal volatility affects dopamine regulation. The second way that ADHD and perimenopause can be especially distressing is cumulative burnout from years of compensating and masking, and I will go back to hormones. By midlife, many women assume that they should already understand their ADHD by now. They've lived with their brain for decades. They've learned to cope using those workarounds or other workarounds. They built systems that worked well enough to get them through school, work, parenting, and responsibility. So when things start to feel harder, the women, we wonder, what the hell is going on? It's confusing. It's disorienting. So here's something important to know. What changes during perimenopause isn't just hormones level. I just bungled that. I'll say that again. What changes during perimenopause isn't just hormone levels. What changes is the predictability of the brain's internal environment. And as I said earlier, estrogen doesn't decline in a straight line. It fluctuates, sometimes dramatically, because estrogen influences dopamine regulation. Fluctuations in estrogen affect focus, motivation, working memory, and emotional regulation. For an ADHD brain, those fluctuations are especially significant and noteworthy. So if you've relied on consistency, urgency, or adrenaline to function, unpredictable shifts in dopamine can make those strategies unreliable. Those coping mechanisms you relied on become part of your identity. And on that, another reason this phase feels different is that it often coincides with a shift in identity. And I mean, there's a lot of different identities going on. It's you're changing roles as a parent, as a child, as a colleague, personal and work, your identity shift. And many women reach midlife having defined themselves by competence. They're the reliable one, the capable one, the one who holds things together. When ADHD symptoms become more visible or harder to manage, it doesn't just affect productivity, it affects self-concept. I'll say that again, because I think it's important. When ADHD symptoms become more visible or harder to manage, it doesn't just affect productivity, it affects self-concept. It challenges the story you've told yourself about who you are and how you function in the world. That's why this period can feel emotionally charged in ways that are hard to explain. And this ties to the emotional layers. It's not just frustration, it's grief. Grief for a version of yourself that could push through without consequence, at least without cost. You can't push through. When you're in your 20s and your 30s, you may feel like you might find that you need less sleep, but you can still sleep better. You know, you can get by. You can study late into the night or party, and then you sleep easy. But when you're older, you want more sleep and can't get it. The brain now requires different kinds of help than it used to, in sleep and other support. Medication experiences can also change during this time. Medication needs. Some women find that their ADHD medication feels less effective or less consistent. Others notice increased sensitivity to side effects. And these shifts are often interpreted as failure or tolerance. When these shifts, got distracted for a second. These shifts are often interpreted as failure or tolerance when they're more accurately described as a mismatch between medication, hormones, and context. I feel like I should create a diagram about this and put it somewhere. So medication could feel less effective, less consistent. Your medication needs change, basically, during midlife with hormonal changes. So without a framework that accounts for ADHD and perimenopause together, it's easy to feel like you're guessing. And guessing is exhausting. Instead of obsessing over what used to work, start asking yourself what support makes sense now in your current situation. You're not 32 anymore, so what are your current needs? That shift matters because it moves you from self-criticism to self-trust. Self-trust is a foundation for everything that follows. Self-trust is very much tied to emotions. So I've talked about hormonal changes that affect focus and emotional regulation. I've talked about cumulative burnout from compensating and masking an identity. And so third, we have life. By your mid-40s, many people's careers peaks. Family responsibilities shift. Your parents age, your children's needs change. Maybe they're out of the house and you don't know what to do with yourself anymore. And I actually have some blog posts about what happens when you suddenly find yourself an empty nester that I published in spring of 2025. So at this point, your own needs get louder, and everyone around you is going through their own life stages, and those affect you too. And that's a lot for any nervous system, especially one that's already working overtime. And remember, there's the hormonal changes going on here. So remember a few moments ago when I told you that as progesterone declines, women often feel more anxious, have trouble, or become irritable? Yeah, so progesterone, that can affect your bullshit tolerance. You might find you have less tolerance for it. Giving fewer fucks as you get older, it's not just about wisdom or having the experience to know what's worth giving your attention to or what's not. That's progesterone, my friends. The giving fewer fucks as you get older, can be an influence of progesterone. That just blew my mind when I read that, when I learned about it. So with that nervous system and progesterone combo, you might feel like you have far less energy available to compensate for the hormonal ADHD and, the chaos. I originally wrote this as the shitstorm, but I felt like with bullshit and fewer fucks I was swearing too much, but here it is. I've just done it. I guess I'm going to have to put that note on this podcast episode. Expletives. So that structure that once held everything together can no longer carry the same weight. I actually used Jenga as an analogy in a LinkedIn article I recently wrote, how everything just, you seem to be balancing it and then it just collapses. So tasks that once felt manageable suddenly feel heavier. Transitions take longer. Decision-making feels harder. Emotions can feel more intense and harder to recover from. When I have emotionally intense days followed by feeling drained, I call it an emotional hangover. I can't remember if I came up with that myself or if I read it somewhere, but I call it an emotional hangover. Your ADHD didn't get worse. You just leveled up the game of life. Buckle up. So, that was a lot, and I'm going to start wrapping up here. Perimenopause doesn't erase who you are. It doesn't undo decades of capability, growth, or insight. It's a transition that requires you to listen more closely to your body and your brain. Where you're going is not back to where you were. You're not going back to who you were. You're going forward into a different relationship with support. One that doesn't rely on constant compensation or pushing through. Midlife often reveals where we've been coping and where the gaps are. And once you see that and you fill those gaps and upgrade your strategies for life success, things will be easier, because what worked in your 20s and 30s won't work now. So in the next episode, I'm going to discuss coaching versus therapy and how each can support you in different ways. I recommend both. Until then, remember, you're human, and humans go through different stages in life. You're changing, it's natural. And change deserves care, not criticism. So be patient with yourself, adapt as needed, and get in touch with me if you want one-on-one support. My website is in the podcast description. You're not imagining this shift, and you're not alone in it. Know that. And that's all I got for today. Have a good one.